Singaporeans are set to pay more for everyday items, with inflation forecast to get worse in the coming months. Team Singapore returning from the SEA Games with new records, personal bests and 164 medals. Australia's new Prime Minister is sworn in with the Labour Party back in power after 9 years. Happy Monday, it's 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story with me, Harianto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. Inflation is going up and so are your grocery and energy bills. Singapore's core inflation jumped to 3.3% in April, year-on-year, up from 2.9% the previous month. This is its highest level since February 2012. Prices are rising the most for food, retail and other goods, as well as electricity and gas. Core inflation excludes accommodation and private transport costs, and officials say it's forecast to increase further in the coming months. Measures taken to fight rising prices may lead to a recession. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong telling Nikkei in an interview that is a risk which we have to anticipate and watch out for. You will have to take that risk because if you do not act against inflation, that will become a very serious problem for the world. PM Lee will be attending the International Conference on the Future of Asia in Tokyo this week. UOB economist Barnabas Gan is here to weigh in on the figures out today. Barnabas, with inflation at a 10-year high and rising, how is this detrimental to the economy? Will inflation lead to a recession?
Hi, I think it's important to note that inflation has been led by higher commodity prices in Singapore. The fact is that Singapore is a price taker, and we are a small and open economy, and higher oil and food prices have been the key driver in inflation. But also for the fact that we have to recognize that inflation has also been driven by the recovery, really from the tighter labor market, and that is also a key, effect to the higher wages that we've seen, and that for the better, the demand-driven economy for inflation perhaps really is also, a sizable factor for lifting inflation. So basically inflation is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a natural effect from a recovery, but also, if inflation is running too fast and too high, that would also curtail domestic demand, as well as investments in the region and Singapore. So I think the golden question really is inflation is going to be a driver, or more so, a reason for recession. I think what we do see really is the fact that inflation is the recession is not a key base case scenario, at least for us. Why do I say this? Is simply because we have, at least from the Singapore perspective, we have recovered very well post-pandemic. We have effectively been really in the endemic COVID-19 situation. We have very high vaccination rates, and of course, for that matter, the global growth around the region, has been a supportive driver for both Singapore's manufacturing as well as export industries. I think also the higher interest rates that we have seen really from the FOMC perspective, and we are expecting the FOMC to raise rates further, from now to the rest of the year, if not for the next year as well. So I think it has to be balanced with a really improving global growth dynamics in order for us to avoid a recession scenario for the next year.
So besides having a stronger Singapore dollar, what else can authorities do to combat higher inflation?
Well, I think really the key tool that the MAS have in trying to combat inflation has been the monetary policy. And do note that monetary policy has actually been tightened in the last three meetings. and that would also mean, that given Singapore being a price taker, a more expensive Singapore dollar in relative to the rest of Asia, it's actually one of the key factors in mitigating imported inflation. At least from a small and open economist perspective like Singapore, I believe that Singapore being such a small economy have little say in dictating how food and oil prices may trend. I think one other avenue that policy could actually take, and this has also been announced in the last budget. It's really from the cash handouts from the CDC vouchers. We do know that $100 is actually being rolled out this year, and $200 of CDC vouchers is expected to be rolled out in 2023 and 2024, and that should be, more so the resources that households could have to actually mitigate the rising prices across Singapore.
Barnabas, thank you for your insights. Barnabas Gan, economist at UOB. Home Affairs and Law Minister SHANMUGAM says threats mentioning the 9/11 attacks have been made against Singapore by supporters of an Indonesian preacher who was denied entry into the country. Last Monday, Abdul Somad Batubara, as well as 6 people who were travelling with him from Batam, were turned away at Singapore's borders over what MHA called extremist and segregationist teachings. Mr. SHANMUGAM spoke to reporters today.
One comment which Meta has disabled, it's disabled the account for violating community standards, and it removed the comment. And I quote, it says, "Dear you, the leaders of Singapore, the Islamophobic countries, we are waiting 2 times 24 hours to apologize to the Indonesian people and Muslims. If you ignore our warning, then we will not hesitate to expel the ambassador of your country. We will send Islamic defender troops, prosperous justice troops, and ulama defender troops to attack your country like 9/11 in New York, 2001. And we will also expel Singaporeans who pretend to transit and live in Indonesia." So a very direct threat linking to 9/11 against Singapore, Singaporeans, both here and in Indonesia. I think one shouldn't dismiss them completely because, parallels are being drawn with 9/11. Parallels are being drawn with Singaporeans being led by non-Islamic leaders, and that Singapore should be attacked. Singaporean interests should be attacked. So I wouldn't be dismissive of the comments.
Mr. SHANMUGAM also reveals that some people who have been investigated under the Internal Security Act were followers of Somad. This includes a 17-year-old who was detained in January 2022.
Somad, we have known of him for some time. Some of the people that ISD has investigated in Singapore for radicalization, one of the things we picked up is that they were watching videos of Somad, were following his preachings. One of them was a 17-year-old detained under the Internal Security Act in 2 years ago, January 2020. He had watched Somad's YouTube lectures on suicide bombing. And the young boy began to believe that if you fought for ISIS and if you are a suicide bomber, you can die as a martyr and receive rewards in heaven. So you can see Somad's preachings have real-world consequences.
In other news, Singapore, we're back. Malaysian low-cost carrier FIREFLY announcing today that it will restart flights between Seletar Airport and Sultan Abdul Aziz Shah Airport in Subang from June 13th. To begin with, there will be 2 flights a day, down from 6 a day 2 years ago. Seletar Airport has not served passengers since the pandemic struck. Green Day, Westlife and Marshmello are set to perform at the F1 Singapore Grand Prix this year. More acts are expected to be announced soon, and the final lineup will include more than 75 performances that will take place across 8 stages in the F1 Circuit Park at the Marina Bay. The 31st SEA Games in Hanoi concludes today, with host nation Vietnam taking the top spot on the medal table and Singapore coming in 5th place. Looking at the overall tally, Team Singapore bagged 47 gold, 46 silver and 71 bronze medals. This is Singapore's third best showing at an away SEA Games, behind Kuala Lumpur in 2017 and Manila in 2019. Both featured a significantly larger contingent of athletes. This year's contingent consisted of 424 athletes across 33 sports. The swimmers contributed 21 gold, 11 silver and 12 bronze medals, finishing as the top nation in the sport, as did fencing and bowling. Now, sports correspondent Sazali Abdul Aziz discusses what these achievements mean for Singapore sport.
Certainly, I think it's a really laudable performance by our Team Singapore athletes. There's a bit question mark of how well they would do at this SEA Games, given it's the first one coming out of the pandemic. Many of them hadn't had the proper opportunities to train or even compete overseas in the last 2 years. Some even had to rely on their results from the 2019 SEA Games to earn their ticket for Hanoi. But having said that, taking all of that into account, they have certainly delivered by and large. Swimming has kept up their usual high standards and delivered 21 goals. And obviously, they are still the top nation at the SEA Games. Other sports where we have also topped the medal tallies for their sports are bowling and fencing. And there are also some milestone performances in sports like pencak silat and athletics. So many bright points. There are a couple of sports that under-delivered or delivered below their expectations, shooting one of them. A number of sports also, as always, will return from the SEA Games empty-handed. But having said that, there's a lot to be happy about. Many debutants, over a third of our medals delivered by first-timers. So yeah, I think it's a bright future ahead for Singapore sports.
Overseas, as more cases of monkeypox are confirmed, the world is facing formidable challenges, according to the head of the World Health Organization. Right now, WHO is working to better understand the extent and cause of the monkeypox outbreak.
Of course, the pandemic is not the only crisis in our world. As we speak, our colleagues around the world are responding to outbreaks of Ebola in DRC, monkeypox and hepatitis of unknown cause, and complex humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Somalia, South Sudan, the Syrian Arab Republic, Ukraine, and Yemen. We face a formidable convergence of disease, drought, famine, and war, fueled by climate change, inequity, and geopolitical rivalry.
The Russia-Ukraine crisis is set to top the agenda as the World Economic Forum in Davos gets underway. Russian President Vladimir Putin has not been invited to attend the event this year. The forum will instead host Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who will give an address via video link. You can follow our coverage from Davos at str.sg/WEF. Australia's new Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was sworn into office today, even though votes from Saturday's election are still being counted. And it remains unclear if he will govern with a majority. The reason is, Mr. Albanese has to travel to Tokyo for a security summit with the leaders of the US, India and Japan.
The relationship with the United States is our most important, along with our relationships in the region and our multilateral commitments as well. So the meetings that we will have, not just with the United States, but importantly with our hosts in Japan and India, are going to be very important in a good way.
Our Australia correspondent Jonathan Perlman joins us now from Sydney. John, with Mr. Albanese not skipping the Quad meeting in Tokyo, what signal does it send to Australia's largest trading partner, China?
Yes, so Anthony Albanese, Australia's new Prime Minister, has made it very clear that he will not be changing the previous government's approach to China, which was really an unyielding approach, refusing to budge to any sort of Chinese pressure or Chinese economic coercion. And Albanese has said that he will stick with the previous government's approach, which really saw China as worryingly assertive and aggressive in the region. And so he will be trying to counter that and defend Australia's interests against that. And so this trip to the Quad is very much in line with that approach. Scott Morrison, if he'd still been Prime Minister, would have gone to the Quad. Now Albanese is doing that, and he will be trying to show some level of continuity in Australia's approach to China.
And talking about the domestic front, John, what are Mr. Albanese's top priorities going to be when he returns to Canberra? Any major policy changes?
Yes, so his policies will be firmly focused on the economy. Australia, like many parts of the world, is facing high inflation and wages are not keeping up with that. And Albanese wants to help people through that, try to improve productivity by assisting women into the workforce, by helping with childcare, finding ways to just lift Australia's productivity as the economy starts to turn. But he's also made it clear that he will be adopting much more ambitious climate policy, and he will quickly move to start increasing Australia's emissions reductions targets and really reversing the more resistant and kind of almost denialist approach at times that the previous government had taken to climate. So there's some of the measures that we'll see Australia quickly introducing.
Well, thank you so much for your perspectives, Australia correspondent Jonathan Perlman. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you tomorrow on The Big Story.